Good afternoon. I'm just trying to see the back end of this room, so just getting used to the stage. It's nice to be here, and thank you, Samir, for putting this safe space together. You know, one of the conversations we had while we were planning this event was an opportunity to bring the fraternity together and just talk about, what matters. And as we know, there's just so much going on. I mean, I think we are going through one of the most challenging and disruptive phases ever. It's also the most uncertain phase. No one knows, what's really around the corner, and anybody who can, read the crystal ball, I mean, obviously, can go places in this time. So I'm going to talk about 10 things that are in my mind. And given the fact that, this is to obviously a group of GCC leaders that are excelling in everything that you do, I wanted to talk about things that are obviously the adjacencies to our industry. So I want to start talking about this whole notion of maturity at scale. Never in the history we've seen the level of maturity, the number of mature GCCs as they exist today. I remember not very long ago, all the GCCs had to go through a 4-stage evolutionary process, typically starting off with some sort of an experimental platform, optimize the platform as you go through the ups and downs, scale, go broad and deep across the organization, and at some stage dare to transform and innovate. And there's so much maturity, whatever the right numbers are, 17 or 1900 GCCs, majority of them having gone through the battle scars, and the maturity that exists is unprecedented. So the GCCs that are coming in today are benefiting from the late mover advantage. You don't have to go through this journey anymore. You just arrive. Many of them are now looking at, extrapolation of some of the mature GCCs, Target, Lowe's, Walmart, some of the tech product companies, many of the BFSI GCCs, Goldman Sachs, Wells Fargo Bank, hard to even count the number of mature GCCs, and just arriving where they could be, I guess, 2 years, from now, and that becomes the starting point. So this is a very interesting development because it's going to put a lot of pressure on the incumbents. At the same time, it gives a huge advantage to the new GCCs that are coming in. As a coincidence, we are inaugurating, one of the largest GCC for one of the largest retailers, or $100 billion company. And they're starting off with their AI and data leader being in the GCC. They have a very clear idea about where they want to go, what the expectations are. And some of them obviously include, the paradigm shift from headcount to outcomes. There is no more focus on headcount. Headcount will become a meaningless notion in the AI era, and everybody knows it. So we don't know how workforce transformation ultimately will go to. It'll be, agents, people, obviously the managed service providers, but the fact remains that it's outcomes that are ultimately going to matter. And we're going to see the first outcome-focused GCC that will take roots tomorrow. I guess, talking of maturity at scale, the other interesting aspect is the lines getting blurred between the enterprise and the GCC. We've seen it happening over a period of time. I can talk about the last maybe 10, 15 GCCs that we have done. It's hard to tell where the enterprise ends and where the GCC begins, right? So it is one seamless, boundaryless global organization which is at play. So think about the power of maturity at scale, and it is this maturity that is going to, catapult this industry to a whole different level altogether. The second thing I want to talk about is the biggest leadership risk that all of us are going to confront as we take this industry forward. When we spoke about, or when Sameer was talking about, what are some of the keywords associated with GCCs, or what makes a GCC successful, one of the first dimensions that came out was leadership. We are at a time where we're going to see our biggest leadership risk when it comes to the GCCs. And much of it stems from the fact that we are assuming that India and the GCCs more broadly will naturally lead. Now, in all the profound changes that are right around the corner, this will bring a lot of challenges for the GCC leaders. Much of it has to do with how do we invest in building leadership capabilities, how do we bring in AI fluency across the GCCs, and how do we constantly upskill the workforce so that they can stay relevant. Keeping GCCs fresh and new at all times is going to be a big leadership risk and challenge. And I guess, this is something that is going to be at play just when leadership at GCCs was becoming extremely important. The next thing I want to talk about is this whole notion of best sourcing. So think about, the offshore, global talent pendulum that has swung from one corner to the other or one end to the other. We've seen insourcing, outsourcing, and now we're talking of some notion of best sourcing, both sourcing. So it is not going to be as much about where the work gets done. It is going to be about who does that work, right? And that script is being written as we speak. And as the broader industry comes to terms with the fact that there would be a coexistence of GCCs, service providers, and not in the very distant future, AI as well. So I guess anybody who figures out the best recipe for best sourcing is here to win. There is some tremendous work going on, and much of it also has to do with the fact that the center of gravity, for many enterprises is moving to the GCC as they look at doing some more strategic foundational, work out of the GCCs, as they look at, leapfrogging into the future, or, accelerating their transformation endeavors. One of the basic premise that is leading to some of the newer GCCs that are coming is the fact that organizations are in the throes of a massive paradigm shift that brings a huge change in the organizations, and the change can be so profound that it can derail organizations. So if you remote enterprise change, which can be done effectively, through the GCCs, it can potentially work. So we're seeing a lot of transformative sort of GCCs that will not only accelerate, but also, enable transformation, through adoption of workforce changes, technology, and of course, some of the emerging AI paradigms. I'm going to talk about, a whole lot that's going on, and obviously the very uncertain future that we are in the middle of. There is a lot of global turmoil, geopolitics. We've seen the recent news about the H-1B visa hike. We don't know much more about where the taxes and tariffs are going to lead us to. AI is going to be another big disruptor. But I guess in many ways, this turmoil and chaos is a blessing in disguise for the GCC industry. I guess it is a wake-up call of sorts, because there is a lot more work now to be done in an accelerated manner to ensure that we can take advantage of, the chaotic situation that we are in, and do a remakeover of some of the GCC. Much of it is already reflecting in some of the newer GCCs that are coming in. They are considering the fact that there may not be any more H-1B visas. There may be restrictions on work being done in global locations. There may be an increased cost, which is almost certain that by end of this year, we could see as much as a 25% increase as a result of the new Hire Act if it gets legislated, by the US government. And if that happens, obviously, the calling is on us to, redefine what we can all stand for. It'll become a value game. AI acceleration will become a much bigger reality. And a lot that we've spoken about in the past in terms of innovation, transformation, outcomes will become a much bigger reality. We're also seeing a lot of companies that were almost in the process of setting up GCCs have now put a pause and are redeveloping the architecture of what a post turmoil or what would triumph look like in a very chaotic, possibly 26. So there are all kinds of doomsday predictions, situations that are being simulated around, most of them in the first half of 26. So the new architecture that is being built, which is going to be focused a lot more on value, a lot more on workforce transformation, a lot more on AI enablement, a lot more on building a set of sophisticated capabilities, taking leadership to a whole different level altogether, giving a different meaning to what culture means, is all in the works. So think about what it does to the industry. I guess some form of a GCC industry 4.0, is, just right around the anvil. And a whole lot of us look at, obviously, a huge opportunity in the chaos and the turmoil that is just around the corner. So all of us, we're going to be talking a lot about AI, right? And we know that it's not here. In many cases, it's a solution in search of a problem. But I can tell you for sure, it's making its way slowly and surely. It is around the corner. It is, there are some meaningful use cases that are becoming a big reality when it comes to AI. And I guess the biggest change that companies are coming to terms with is what the workforce of the future would look like. Where would labor be substituted? Where would productivity and work efficiency be amplified? Where would you have hybrid teams with people and agents working together? Where would agents supervise people? Where would people supervise agents? All kinds of situations are currently being simulated. Yesterday, we all saw NVIDIA investing $100 billion in OpenAI, right? A lot of this money, of course, goes into the extra or the additional compute and the power that OpenAI is going to require. But some of the experiments that OpenAI is talking about in terms of, building the next stage consulting capabilities, so RIP, MBBs in, some ways. So some part of this $100 billion is going to make its way into, where AI is going. In fact, we've been doing a lot of work, and we're looking at, GCCs of a future. We look at our business as the legacy business, which is all about what we do today. It's about talent. It's about culture. It's about all the, corporate support functions. It's about infrastructure. But as we look at what a GCC is going to look like in not so distant future, possibly as early as, Q1 of 26, it's going to be very, very different in its, form and structure. I mean, think about some sort of a palantirization of the GCC industry. And I guess it requires a whole different way of thinking, because if we apply a legacy mindset to using the power of AI, it's not going to go very far, right? So I guess a lot of unlearning, before we get to learn the power and potential of AI. But it is here. It is, going to make a huge impact, and maybe it'll be more disruptive than geopolitics. It'll be more disruptive than H-1B visa. It is going to be more disruptive than any other diktats that may come from different parts of the world in terms of what work can be done where. The thing about AI making its way and our readiness is the fact that most organizations are not ready. I mean, research has shown that only 14% of the organizations in some ways are AI ready, because it's not as much about algorithms or products or platform. A lot of it is around, of course, data. It's around redesigning some of the processes or how business functions work. It's about upskilling people. It's about getting people, working closely, with the agents. It's about contextually empowering the agents. It's about developing culturally compatible agents. So there is a lot in the works. You cannot have an agent, that is a one-size-fits-all. And, in the not-so-distant future, you'll also see agents that will have that cultural compatibility. But I guess the most important aspect is going to be a whole new way of working, a whole new way of thinking. And companies that are able to change and transform themselves in terms of ways of working will get AI right and will lead the way, and obviously will be a lot more competitive. So a follow-on to obviously AI making its way in the enterprises and therefore into the GCCs. In fact, GCCs will lead the enterprise AI charge, is the great change management test that we are about to embark on. And AI adoption possibly is going to be the biggest change management test in modern work history. And I want to go back to this whole notion of shedding the weight around legacy thinking, old ways of working, not understanding how people and machines can work together, this whole notion of culturally compatible machines, the notion of humans reporting to people, people reporting to humans. All of that is going to be a huge change for the organization. And in the process of driving change, maintaining the trust of the workforce, right? So this is a change that is not going to be easy, and I guess this is going to be the biggest change management test for modern work. So we know that a large part of the work, 40 to 60%, in the near future, will be reshaped by everything AI. So finance, customer support, IT operations will be most affected. And for all of us over here, AI is going to redefine how we look at leadership and how we look at reskilling and upskilling our workforce, and how do we build and sustain that workforce trust that is going to be extremely important. So I'm going to talk a little bit about, switch gears and talk about emerging locations. There's a lot of talk and noise and incentives and policies coming out from different emerging locations. I guess the whole country is on fire when it comes to everything GCCs, but there's a big reality. The tier 1, the primary GCC locations are extremely saturated. Try going to high-tech city in Hyderabad to find even 10,000 square feet of space, not available, right? And whatever space is available in other micro markets is going to be taken up fairly soon. Bangalore, we know the problems, very saturated. We know what's going on in NCR, etc. So, emerging locations are going to become a very big reality. There is a lot of work that is currently underway in making emerging locations a very big reality. we've just started undertaking some work with Gift City that now has to do with, leapfrogging, where GCCs should be going in 2026 and beyond. The reason why emerging locations were not catching momentum was because of talent issues, because of maybe infrastructure and connectivity, etc. The whole talent paradigm is going to be disrupted by everything AI. So, think about a location where you need only so many people, a lot of AI, and a very different kind of a connectivity. In fact, as we look at, some of the geopolitical pressures and we look at the need for building near shore or onshore, GCCs, now it is a big reality. Nothing stops you from building a GCC in New York for a company based in California, because a lot of this could be AI powered, right? So some of those paradigms is like like fresh blood being infused in the whole notion of emerging location. So here's the premise around emerging location, the new premise, post H1B, post some of the geopolitical chaos, post the fact that there is saturation, etc. The incentives that emerging locations are offering will now suddenly become very meaningful, with a 25% increase in cost because of taxes and tariff. You need all those incentives. AI will take the dependence on people to some extent for certain functions away. More important, the emerging locations can start afresh and maybe lead the way for the new age GCCs. There's also some talk around, hybrid GCCs that would have a beachhead in one of the emerging locations and maybe, a bigger location in one of the tier one, so that you get the benefits of both the incentives and, what a tier one location gives. So watch out for this space. 26, we're going to see significant amount of activity, specifically when the National Collaborative Framework for Emerging Locations for setting up GCCs is promulgated by the government. So there'll be a lot more consistency and a lot more financial and intangible incentives to go to a Visakhapatnam or go to a GIFT or to an Indore or to a Madurai or to a Coimbatore. The good news is, wherever you go, you'll see a lot of GCCs, and it obviously is good for the industry. So a little bit about what's going on from a government. Shalini is here. We both in one of the governmental committees, chaired by 𝗵𝗍, but there are a lot of other government initiatives that are going on at the same time. Everything from simplifying the regulatory framework to maybe creating additional incentives. And now if something was to go wrong from a tax and tariff and higher act perspective, expect more incentives to come. So the government realizes the importance of GCC for the broader social and economic development of the country. Think about the fact that as an industry, we're almost 1.5 times or 1.5% of India's GDP. By 2047, you're looking at 3.3, 3.4% of a much larger, economy. So obviously, the government is in full gear in terms of, looking at this sunrise industry, which is many ways going to be resilient even to, what AI can do, right? So H1Bs impact the managed services industry. We see the positive impact it has on the GCCs. But the fact that you go beyond the tier one locations, emerging locations, jobs, investments, there is obviously a lot more coming from the government side. I want to take a few minutes talking about, the extremely high entropy environment, this gold rush of GCCs has led to. And maybe a call for action from all of you is, what can you do to simplify the narrative and have your own stories be taken out so that companies that are looking at setting up GCCs don't get confused about what does it take to set up a GCC, right? So in very simple terms, you're just setting up another location, another office for a company. How difficult it would be to set up an office for another office of a company. And companies have been doing this all the while. Specifically global companies have multiple offices around the world. But when it comes to setting up a location in India for ITES kind of services, it suddenly becomes a very complex task. So there are all kinds of quacky narratives that are in many ways constraining the broader growth of the industry, because it is taking a narrative out to the potential companies that are looking at coming to India about the complexity, the nuances of setting up a GCC. On one hand, we talk about maturity of scale. We talk about the fact that we have 1,700 GCCs with almost 2 million people, and the fact that this number will double and triple at some point in the future. We're also talking about the fact that the new narrative in the market is that it is extremely complex, and companies will fail until they adopt a particular path. So I guess the point I'm making is the role each one of you can play in taking that simplified narrative, your own success story, to the broader market, so that it'll help the other companies make their way into our industry. And this is going to be helpful for all of us, more particularly the very challenging economic and political phase we are going to face as a country if something was to go wrong in the coming months because of our inability to strike a trade deal with the US. This concept of giving back, not from a CSR perspective, but what can we do for the broader good for the industry? There are many in this room where, many of you in this room again helped in terms of, opening the doors and participating in roundtables, meeting the visitors, explaining your success story, helping companies understand the tricks and traps, and maybe a lot more is required. We are at a point of inflection. A lot more companies are coming in. GCCs is, in many ways, is a show and tell story. The more they walk the aisles and see, GCCs and life in action, it introduces that comfort. So again, a request to each one of you, please contribute to giving back to this industry. We are all poised to become, one of the 10 pillars of our 𝗵𝗂𝗃 Bharat strategy, and some part of this is not going to be achieved if we are, not going to be committed to, giving back to the industry that got us to this place in the first place. So that was all I had to say, and if you have any questions at this point, I'll be happy to take them.
If there's anyone who wants to ask a question, you may raise your hand. Our runner will come to you with the mic. Let's give a round of applause for Mr. Lalit for that thought leadership.